ain't woke and you ain't broke, you ain't going to heaven. If you ain't woke and you ain't broke, you're definitely not going to Christian heaven. Jesus gave his Sermon on the Mount. I read them words and this is what I found. If you ain't woke and you ain't broke, you ain't going to heaven. I said, if you ain't woke and you ain't broke, you are not going to Christian heaven. Okay, so there's always this talk about anti-vaxxers. So I had something on the brain I wanted to talk about. My oldest friend in the world back home, very toxic person. He's now wealthy, but he's like surrounds himself. He lives in a junkyard in the middle of town. He's like because he has money, he's eccentric. If he didn't have money, he'd just be a trashy bum. Anyway, he always said that we were washing our hands too much. Like when we would go deer hunting, he would make fun of me for bringing a toothbrush. So he would leave the house for days and not bring a toothbrush. Anyway, the guy's wealthy, you know, he's a trust fund baby. So I moved away right before the COVID shutdown. And, you know, as you do, I didn't talk to him for a year or so. And when I did finally contact him, we talked about Joe Rogan. And I kind of started talking about how stupid Joe Rogan was. And somewhere in there, I believe he got offended. Anyway, he was telling me about the myocarditis, some heart thing. So I had looked into that and found out, of course, that was some bullshit, something stupid Joe Rogan was talking about, because Joe Rogan is just very, very stupid. And the money makes it worse. The big pile of money they pay him to just sit there and say whatever makes him remarkably, amazingly stupid. Anyway, so my friend didn't get vaccinated, got COVID, and had a stroke during having COVID. So that's funny to me. He was never a good person. I can see now that all the toxic people in my life were my fault. That the toxicity I was used to as a child is the toxicity that I sought as an adult my whole life, right? So my oldest friend in the world was toxic because, you know, so were my parents. You know, you might reflect on that yourself, that the toxicity that follows you around is you. You're the one resonating with your toxicity. It has a resonant tone that you might remember from good old dad or whatever. Anyway, so last time I called my friend, all I heard was, I think he said hello. And I said, hey, man, I hadn't talked to you in a while, you know, because where I'm living, I had to be working full time and homeless for about 2 months. So I was, you know, I wasn't real sociable for a while. And so I called him to really, I guess I was gloating. He 100% saw it as gloating because you know why? Because he's toxic. That's what he would be doing. He would be gloating. So when I called and said, hey, man, how are you since the stroke? And he hung up on me. I can only assume he knew that I was going to ask him about the myocarditis and say, thank God you didn't get myocarditis. Thank God you only had a stroke. But I think his speech is so affected, he doesn't want to speak where I can hear it because he probably sounds like a guy who had a stroke. Anyway, anti-vaxxers getting sick and then not being alive from COVID anymore is the most perfect thing to happen in my lifetime. I just wish it hadn't happened to my dad. You know what I mean? Like my dad bought into all that right-wing bullshit. He listened to Tucker Carlson. And he had a former PCA friend, personal care assistant, who all through the pandemics didn't have shit to do. So she went to all the old people's house just to visit every day. My dad was one of them, without wearing a mask or getting vaccinated. And my dad died of COVID pneumonia. She was his only visitor. Anyway, yeah, I've been vaccinated, boosted. I've got the free test kits from the government. So I've tested myself every time I've gotten like a cold. And I'm pretty sure I've never gotten COVID. Knock on wood. And yes, that probably does make me smarter than you. It's okay. I'm not smart either. The only research I did on the vaccine was how do I get to the place where they're giving the vaccine, because I was new in this town. So I had to get directions to the convention center. That was the research I did. Oh, and by then I had deleted my Facebook by then, because Facebook is nothing but toxic. I caught my dad, he was talking about his friend. And I got to realize it was some friend on Facebook. I was like, Dad, that's possibly what they call a bot, which means you could very well just be agreeing with yourself. Like your loop might be a one-person loop, you and yourself. That bot is you agreeing with yourself over and over. That's not your friend. And the ones that really are humans, they're not your friends either, Dad. He was repeating Tucker Carlson bullshit. Anyway, anti-vaxxers dying of COVID is perfect. Thank you.